talking about Daleks in Manhattan and...
Evolution of the Daleks.
Right, okay. Those two episodes. And for those watching this as separate videos, Edward just mentioned that's the Torchwood episode that we just talked about, Ghost Machine, to these two episodes. You want to expand on that statement, Edward?
It's staggering that both the Torchwood episode we talked about previously, Ghost Machine, and this were written by the same writer, but the circumstances on this one are a bit different because she had a bit of a crunch time, and that really shows because these two were originally meant to be written by Stephen Moffat, but then the person who was originally going to write the Dr. Light episode dropped out, and then Stephen Moffat was like, I'd like to write a Dr. Light episode.
To be fair, that might have been worth it in the end. We had to suffer through this to get Blink, so.
I did not know that. That's interesting information.
Online about what people thought about these episodes, and then she felt the need to get rid of her computer afterwards.
Now I'm going to be spending literally all night thinking about the alternate universe where Stephen Moffat wrote all three of these episodes.
I mean, it would have been better. I'm just going to say that right now. The whole thing, though, with the premise of this episode, aren't the Daleks like Nazis and they have to say pure?
Yeah, it's like their whole shtick is everything wrong with the idea of racial supremacy, and the idea of them trying to evolve out of their self-destructive nature kind of sounds like it goes against their whole nature as a concept. So even if Moffat wrote this episode, he would have been put into a bit of a tight corner.
I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it just seems like the premise of this is doomed to fail from the get-go.
Can say with confidence that I'm going to again be the more positive voice on this episode. I like this story about as much as I liked Ghost Machine. Like, it has issues of it, and just some plot stuff is really, really, really dumb. But I enjoyed it more than I expected to, given like the reputation that it has online. And like Nash did his review tearing it apart. I don't think it's a terrible two-parter the way that I used to.
For me, it falls apart completely in part two, whereas part one was rocky, but it showed potential.
Clearly, you guys have an issue with the idea of the Daleks wanting to evolve, but I think these episodes handle that about as well as you could. They're not all for it, right? Like, the Daleks turn on each other.
Daleks is completely for. Like, the other three are like, this is Ron. I have doubts about our leader.
Yeah, and then they turn on him and they chain him up as like an abomination.
Yeah, but that's after it goes wrong. We're going along with it, but then when they saw, oh no, he has too much human in him, this is now, we have to.
Yeah, because he's in charge. And it's like, because there's so many different variables in this situation, and the main one is, from everything we're told, these aren't just like normal Daleks. Like the Cult of Skaro, we get it hammered in here and back in Doomsday, is like they're specifically bred to be the Daleks capable of out-of-the-box thinking.
The people that think like the enemy so that they can think of new ways to crush their enemy that's being harder to defeat than usual.
But the whole point of them is to have a pure race.
There's only 4 of them left in the entire universe, as far as they know. If their job is basically to be the Daleks who will get creative, then I think it makes perfect sense that they would at least try, like, okay, it's either we do this and we sacrifice the racial purity thing, or we die. And I think the Daleks, as we've known them, are more into survival even than they are staying pure. Like, what matters is that some of a Dalek remains in existence at all times.
That's where our differences are going to be, like, on the episode. I could see them, I guess, rather dying than wanting to be human. The very first, like, Dalek episode we had, like, okay, he got imprinted with Rose and he'd rather be dead than have this. But I mean, I is one Dalek, but I don't know, it just seems like to me, without that racial, or most of that racial purity, they seem like they can't handle it. So to be like half human, that would be like going way out there.
Well, yeah, but then this story is about how they can't handle it.
It's one of those premises, like, you're either on board with it or not. For me, it just doesn't feel like it's something the Daleks would do, even if they are meant to think outside the box.
Yeah, there are a couple things to tackle in like the rest of the story, because this is another one of those weird things where yet we put their name in the title both times.
It should have been a surprise.
Isn't even clear until about halfway through part 1, but the title is Daleks in Manhattan. What are you doing?
I mean, they're also in the coming up short at the end of Smith and Jones. Even then, the elevator design was a dead giveaway for the reveal shot.
Oh my god, you're right!
The moment I see that elevator design, it's a Daleks again, isn't it? Yep, it is.
Wow, the Cybermen just keep ripping off the Daleks because we do the exact same thing in Dark Water like years from now. When it's like
I'm dead.
It's the exact same thing though, where we ruin the fact that the Cybermen were in the episode, and in the story, the first hint that it's Cybermen is an elevator.
That is the first damn it Moffat moment in this series. We finally got there.
Imagine that's the one like story element that Moffat had already come up with that like the next writer just went with. Like, I want to do a cool thing with an elevator.
Yeah, it's like that was his one mark. That was the only thing he wrote in the whole episode.
I think it was just something that he mentioned when all the writers got together to talk about the episodes they were writing. And Helen Rayner at this time was the head script editor for the show.
Just something that I guess people in general should know about me that is probably a major factor into why I enjoyed this episode more than a lot of people do is that bad accents in things do not bother me.
Extra brownie points that they have bad accents?
No, I just like, I don't even think about it.
Do.
It's just because I know people in real life who have real accents that sound like if you put them in a TV show, they'd sound ridiculous. Like they sound like the cartoon version of that accent. So when a lot of people like cite Tallulah and Solomon and Diagoras and Andrew Garfield having like real bad accents, and I will grant you, Andrew Garfield's accent in particular is really bad.
Oh yeah, Spider-Man was in this one. He got sent back in time after Gwen Stacy died.
Yeah, and it's like, it's great because once he plays Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield does a really good kind of like New York accent. And here he's doing like this weird Southern thing. Let's talk about like the human element of this episode or this story. I'm sorry, this is my thing. I instinctually refer to two-parters as one episode, but whatever. I really like Diagoras and Solomon. Diagoras is the guy who gets turned into, like, he mixes with Dalek Sec.
Such a stereotypically evil weasel bad guy, but the actor plays him so well that I just love the character.
Yeah, he could be generically evil, and Solomon could just be generically good, but I think the episode is a little bit better than that. Diagoras and Solomon both fought in the same war, and like we make special mention of like they're both veterans, and they both came out of it with like completely opposite philosophies, and they're kind of like in microcosm the Doctor and the Daleks, where the Doctor and the Daleks are all kind of like veterans of the same war, and one side comes out with the idea like stick together, togetherness is good for the good of everyone, versus just look out for number one, like pure ambition. And so the Daleks and Diagoras are just like, what I learned from the war and this traumatizing experience is you do whatever it takes to stay on top, even if that means destroying everyone else.
I call him Captain Panaka from Star Wars The Phantom Menace.
Is that who that is?
Yes.
Wait, what?
Wait, no.
I'm on his IMDb
remember that
page right now.
I knew that because I made a joke about that in my Star Wars review that I made like 2 years ago. Wow, you're right.
You should seriously get on to redoing those. Potential guest star to provide his own audio. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Man, I feel so bad because, like, my Attack of the Clones review is gone now. Like, it's just gone. Like, I can never get it back.
What happened to it?
It happens whenever you use that on computer. Shit happens.
We changed our computer and just my editing software before I ever got the chance to, like, post it anywhere. It was done editing, too, was the worst part. The sidetrack. Talking about Doctor Who. Freaking Solomon getting us sidetracked onto Star Wars stuff or whatever. I like that he also gets to be flawed. He and the Doctor and Frank and Martha all go down into the sewers to investigate what's up. The pigmen find them, and like they have enough time, I think, to save Frank. But Solomon's like, no, just leave him. And he admits later on, it's like he's scared. Like he's allowed to do something terrible just because he has human fears.
American that's living in the time era of the Great Depression.
Yeah, he's allowed to be scared of these freaking pig monsters to the point that he leaves a kid get taken by them. A lesser episode wouldn't let him do that. A lesser episode would have him like try to save Frank until the bitter end because he's got to be flawless.
I thought Spider-Man stayed back for no reason.
He has a little thing where like he's prodding the pigmen to stay away from them, and he lets everyone else go up first. But then he turns around and he's like, pull me up. And the doctor tries to pull him up, but the pigmen get him. And Solomon's like, leave him, close the door. And he closes the door on him.
Okay. Spider-Man should have went with them, I guess. I guess he kept them back for a few minutes, but
yeah, like the way it's staged, and this might just be a problem of like blocking, it doesn't look like he's accomplishing anything.
Yeah. You can fix that with just better directing.
Okay, so like there are other things in this episode to talk about, but we've already dedicated like a lot of time to the idea of the human Dalek hybrid, thought about the design of that thing.
Why are the squid tentacles still there, and why are they on the head?
I don't know. Just go with it.
No, I can't. That's just taking the design of the hybrid too far.
Thank you. I'm into this episode. For the most part, I'm digging it. But the design of that thing, it's too much. It's too silly. It looks like it's got penises coming out of its head.
I was going to say that the side things is what bother me because it looked like penises. But
why every time I watch the second half, I just keep on giggling whenever Dalek that's a hybrid now is on screen.
With time, I get over it, but seeing it for the first time in a while, it's like, oh wow. That's too much. And also, I understand why you do this. I get it. I get that it costs money to do like a full costume, but the fact that his clothes are intact.
Flashback scene in Miracle Day where Jack sees those events plays out, and the moment he sees the hybrid, he's like,
it's silly.
I mean, if you want to have the Dalek tentacles still be there, then give them hand prosthetics.
Maybe. I don't know what they could do to try to make this look better.
Again, they're doing the best they can with the budget, but there's something about the eye where like it looks like it's a little bit off center and not in a good way.
It's because the eyelids closes sideways instead of up and down like a normal eyelid.
I don't even have a problem with that because it's a hybrid. It's just like its placement on the head, it looks like it should be like it's an inch in the wrong direction of where it should be. But whatever.
You said an inch off center, and now I'm just thinking of the hybrid with its eye completely to the left side of the face.
Back to a positive and kind of maybe a subtler, just like underlying reason of why I enjoyed this episode is that I really like what it has to say about humanity, particularly in the scene that you mentioned, Edward, of Solomon being really naive and trying to reason with the Daleks. First of all, I don't know how naive that is because Solomon doesn't know the Daleks at all.
He just met someone who does, called the doctor, who keeps telling him, negotiating with them is a bad idea and you're going to die.
Yeah, but like he's a very idealistic guy. He's only known the doctor for a day. He's not gonna let like the doctor's warning shake him out of his inherent belief that everyone has some scrap of goodness in them.
Hating that cliche of people's naiveness, getting them killed, and everyone treats it like it's super sad. And I'm like, no, don't give him sympathy. He died as he lived, being an idiot.
That's fair, I guess, for us as an audience, because the dramatic irony is we know exactly how the situation is going to...
If I was directing this episode, I would make that scene a comedy moment.
It would have been more entertaining, but still.
Either way, I like it as a story point, because my thing is, when they first make the hybrid with Diagoras, the doctor's like, how do you feel? Or like, what are you getting? He's like, I feel the human potential aggression and ambition and hatred and war. And those are the things that the Dalek takes as like the positive traits of humanity, is how destructive and Dalek-like they can be. And Diagoras is not a good person. Like, he is a guy who's defined by ambition and he's willing to step on people.
He's a backstabbing, selfish scumbag.
Yeah, he's terrible, but at the same time, as Solomon is making his appeal and when he dies, like, you see the reaction and Dalek Sec like reacts badly to it. What that's saying to me is that, like, for as much of a scumbag as he was, Diagoras still has an inherent sense of empathy and compassion because he's human, and it's like very beneath the surface. Like he has the emotional spectrum, and he makes Dalek feel what it's like to have the human condition, and that includes inherent compassion and empathy for people. And I kind of like that the episode makes that statement. Is like, even if you're the worst kind of person, just by virtue of being a person, you're better than a Dalek.
Creature effects, we already talked about the human Dalek. What do we think about pig slaves?
I'm used to watching this episode and having people talk about this episode. It's like the pig slaves are just the dumbest thing, and they are really dumb, but I can get over it. They look stupid. I don't understand why you would do pig slaves outside of just we want to have a weird animal thing in this episode because we love making weird animal aliens.
You know how I feel
Whatever.
about animal aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of story reasons, it's still lazy.
This is the silly and distracting. You could have done something better. Why don't they just make the human slave somehow?
What's the I feel like they give reasoning in the episode for why they bothered with the pig splicing, but I forgot what the reasoning was, and I don't know if I made a note about it.
It would be better budget-wise just to put some kind of alien chip on the back of their skull and have them act robot-like.
Yeah, or have them like like a collar on and they throw lives with it or something.
Saving that money of that budget could have put more detail and more effort into the hybrid Dalek human design.
Yeah, see, this is another one of the things, like I mentioned with Ghost Machine, where it's like, this particular element of the episode, I could go back and rewatch it, and it could bother me way more than it does right now, but judging it purely on this viewing, it's dumb. There's really no reason for it. It doesn't bother me. Like, it's not something that takes me out of the episode. It's just whatever. It's there.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, everyone's different when it comes to it. It really distracts me.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the ladies. How do you feel about Martha and/or Tallulah in this episode?
Martha is awesome, as always.
Martha's great.
Of course. Tallulah voice is like nails on chalkboard, and it sounds very fake. Kind of gets on my nerves every time she's on screen. Like,
I find her entertaining enough, and there's actually this really subtle running gag with her that I don't know if you guys picked up on, where it's like she has this conversation with Martha about the doctor, and she takes it the wrong way and assumes the doctor is gay.
Yeah.
And like the way that keeps coming up is that she keeps conflating him being gay with him liking show tunes.
Yeah.
And so she'll keep making comments about like him liking musical theater and stuff.
I thought that was a clever little way to add that in there, you know, especially being mid-2000s. They can't just flat out say it for some reason.
It's the time period is why they can't just come out and say it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I found that to be a pretty subtle, funny gag just because in previous viewings of the episode, I never picked up on it. Where it's like the doctor is with the Daleks and he's like going to mess with the radio. Mm-hmm. And Tallulah's like, now's not really, I know you're into show tunes, but it's not really the time. So this has been in the whole like episode and I didn't even realize.
Yeah, that's the one little bit I really like.
I find her relationship with Laszlo decently sweet, where it's like the archetype that her character is, you could see her being really shallow, like their relationship being very thin. But like, no, she genuinely loves him enough to stay with him, even though he's like this disgusting pig creature.
Yeah.
It's like that endears me to her a bit.
She's not completely shallow. Like I say, she's not the worst, but she's just, like I said, some moments like when they're trying to get away and talking.
She's very much an over-the-top stereotype on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's a lot less offensive than some stereotypes previously written on the show, particularly ones written by Davies.
We'll get to those.
They're like, even if it's done on purpose, I'm just not a fan of let's make somebody an over-top cartoony stereotype on purpose.
Yeah, especially for this show where it kind of skirts the line. Like, ever since the beginning, like, since the 60s, we've gone back and forth from, is this the kind of show where characters can just be cartoons, or isn't it? That doesn't always work for people.
Yeah.
By the end of the episode, when it's like Laszlo looks like he's gonna die, and Tallulah's like, Doctor, can't you do something? And it's just like, she's really, really distraught about it. It's like, we can even take the more cartoonish characters and we can bring some pathos out of them. And the fact that this show kind of walks that fine line is part of what makes it unique to me. But yeah, I think she's all right. And Martha is generally really cool in this episode. I don't think she has a big standout moment, but she's very competent and she's very like, she's with it.
Mm-hmm. Except for one part where she tries to go across the stage. It's like, why don't you just go behind the curtain, Martha?
Yeah.
I've worked on a stage before. I know there's room to move around behind a curtain.
That's one of those things where you gotta think maybe it's like someone is writing the episode thinking, we haven't had a funny moment in a little while. Let's do a funny. What are you doing? No one would do that.
Yeah, it just makes her look stupid, and that doesn't fit in character with Martha.
I wouldn't even be surprised if all that was done about this episode is just one story draft and then one production draft.
It feels out of character for her to do something like that. It's like
totally in character for Rose, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had to insult Rose since Rose was mentioned.
Insulting Rose is a hard temptation to ignore. I'll grant you that.
Yeah, I can see Rose doing it.
I don't want to undersell, like, the behind-the-scenes knowledge. This isn't really an episode that feels like a first draft to me from a thematic standpoint. Mm-hmm. I feel like a couple of passovers had to have been given to this episode just in terms of things it's trying to say with characters and stuff, but maybe with the plot, yeah. Which brings me to the Gamma Strike, which we say like 15 times in this episode is a gamma strike. Once it happens, suddenly it's lightning.
That's the moment where my suspension of disbelief with these episodes just goes, no episode. Just some things the Time Lord body is established to take, and this one is just no. It was as the end of time, massive fall that didn't kill David Tennant's Doctor, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
That's not even my issue with it, Edward, is that he couldn't survive it. You may have a point with, like, we've established what the Time Lord body can take, but we do multiple times say that, like, regeneration changes every single cell, it can change your species. If some stuff the Eighth Doctor does in the audios, he is literally superhuman. Mm-hmm. So the Doctor seems to go back and forth based on what incarnation he's in, on like how much physical damage he can take.
You have a lot more leeway because they're audio adventures. You can visualize it into your head where your head's visualization could tone it down. But here where we actually see it, it's just ridiculous. It just comes off as laughable.
It's just, see, my problem isn't that he survives it. Like, whatever. The Doctor survives is something that could totally happen, and is even something that we referenced happening in Smith and Jones. So we know that the 10th Doctor has been struck by lightning before and survived. My problem with it is just that you can't spend half the episode saying that it's gamma radiation and then suddenly it's lightning. Like, everyone knows that those two things aren't even close to the same thing.
Yeah, and on top of that, we are going to transfer DNA through lightning.
It just seems like the writer wrote herself into a corner where I have barely any time left, and the Doctor needs to get out of this somehow, so make it up that his DNA got in the way of the lightning strike.
Yeah. See, it's stuff like that where I agree with you that this feels like a first draft, because we have diagrams, we have visualizations and dialogue in the episode from the Daleks saying, this is a radiation strike. They say it's coming from the sun. They establish with visual this thing that we need. It's coming from the sun. We're here in Manhattan for this reason, because we need this particular, like, sunbeam radiation. Mm-hmm. The sun does not generate lightning strikes.
I'm just going to say, from the radiation to lightning to DNA traveling through with lightning, it's just bad. Let's just put it that way. It's just bad. It's bad science.
That's really the dumbest part of the episode, I think.
Yeah, it is.
It does give us an opportunity for an awesome Martha moment where she, like, comes up with making a sort of, like, line of metal stuff to the elevator to shock all the pigs. Like, that's a really smart scene for her.
Also, the hybrids that they make, like, they're supposed to be, like, somewhat Dalek, I think.
The hybrids. Dun, dun, dun.
They say they're like a new species. Is that really correct? They're just not humans?
I mean, it's a mixture of human, Dalek, and Time Lord.
It's weird because unlike Sec, Diagoras, whatever, they do not look any different from humans.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about this episode, and ironically, the one thing that we have not talked hardly at all about is the Doctor himself. People accuse this episode of getting 10 and the Doctor in general out of character in kind of a bigger way, and I'm not 100% sure where I come down on it on this viewing. I think I don't mind it, but how do you feel about the idea that the Doctor would help the Daleks, like, experiment on not entirely dead, just mostly dead humans for the sake of stopping the Daleks being what they are and, like, changing them fundamentally?
Do it in The Unquiet Dead, so I don't see why that would be out of character here, especially when his worst enemy is looking to change itself into potentially something a lot better.
Yeah, that's where I fall down on it here for, like, at the moment. But I can see the viewpoint of, like, these are human beings. No, the Daleks mention that, like, they're past the point of being resuscitated. But it is kind of disturbing that, like, okay, you're gonna experiment with human corpses collaborating with the Daleks in that. It's a bit iffy.
I don't know. I think it's not that character for the Doctor. Because, like, he looks at the bigger picture. It's like, okay, they're technically already dead, so I might as well make the best out of this. So
To quote the Doctor in The Unquiet Dead, why not? It's just like recycling.
yeah, I could see him being obviously pissed off that they did that to the humans, but it's done.
Yeah, and more often than not, the Doctor is a in the now kind of person.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of character. I think that's more of a projecting their moral view onto what they think the Doctor should have there, but I don't think it's that character.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think for as kind of iffy as he's written in some moments, I think either it might just be Tennant bolstering the writing, but there are some pretty good character bits for him in this episode.
Even in the bad episodes, the Doctor's performance, from the actor, elevates them.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of Colin Baker, because some of the scripts he gotten were just that bad. Colin Baker's Doctor is written as like a major asshole, and no matter how good of an actor you are, no one can salvage any likability when the Doctor's selfishness is taken up to 13.
Doctor moments in this episode are when when he realizes that the Daleks are still alive, and he just has this moment of like, they always survive and I always lose everything.
Well,
and it's
the last time he encountered them, he lost Rose.
Yep.
And in the time before that, his ninth incarnation died.
And this, I will admit, is maybe giving the episode too much credit. I don't think the episode is actually doing this consciously, but the great irony of that line is that the only reason the Doctor feels like he loses everything is because he has something to lose, whereas the Daleks always just barely survive because all they care about is surviving. Like, they have nothing. And so for years and years and years, like decades on TV and millennia in universe, they keep bumping into each other and they keep having the status quo of like, the Doctor will have people with him and they will eventually be gone, and the Daleks will always just barely cling on to survival. And the Doctor can't quite realize that he's the one who's still got the better end of the deal in that situation. My absolute favorite moment for him this episode is near the end, when after everything is said and done and everyone's dead, and it's not everything said and done. They're in the theater, and Dalek Sec has just died, and all the mutant hybrids have just died. Mm-hmm. And the Doctor says, in the whole universe, there's just one Dalek left. And then hard cut, and we're out of the theater, and we're back in the lab in like a split second, and it's the Doctor standing across from Dalek Khan on like the other side of the room. So we just jumped like a lot of time in two cuts, and I thought that was a weirdly powerful transition.
It's like you could tell the Doctor is furious at the last surviving Dalek, but at the same time, he doesn't want to go through committing genocide again.
I didn't even get that. I got it as more like, he's ready to finally end it this time. This is going to be difficult to put into words, but I feel like that's putting us in the Doctor's head. He had to like walk out of the theater, go in the elevator, go down, walk to the lab. He does not care. Like, his brain is not registering anything until the next Dalek is in his sights. So it's almost like, when someone blacks out and, like, they just jump from one moment to the next. That's what I feel like this was. He's so laser focused on, it's just me and you. You're the last one. I'm finally going to get rid of you. And it's like nothing else matters. Just him, the Dalek in that room. Let's get there. And I don't know if the editor made that decision or if that was in the script, but that was a really cool, just like cut. Like wasting no time.
Yeah. And then he loses his chance. Like, no, Doctor, you can't kill the Daleks. We make too much money.
They rake us in too many ratings.
Yep, there you go.
We literally have to make them appear once a year in order to keep the rights.
Do they have to do that anymore?
In place, because if I'm right, recently, either last year or the year before, an entire calendar year did go by without the Daleks being on screen.
Now
they were shown flashback in The Return of Dr. Mysterio, I think.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
They're probably going to have to do something like that for the 11th season if they have a copyright thing, because apparently there's no Dalek episodes. So.
The creator of the Daleks, like the creators of most things pop culture, when they died, their estate has a battle of the studio over rights.
Before we end this, I was going to ask, what do you guys think about the whole, like, Martha having a crush on the Doctor, and we have to constantly talk about that at least once per episode?
I feel like this is just me, like, maturing as a viewer of this show. I was expecting to be bothered by it as we go through this season, but the more and more I watch Series 3, the less and less this bothers me. It doesn't feel like the way it used to feel like for me, like when I first watched this series years ago. The way it felt to me then was like the show was being really unfair to Martha, and the show was trying to, like, belittle her for the sake of keeping Rose on people's minds. It doesn't really feel like that to me anymore. It just feels like we bring up Rose to the natural extent that, like, no time passed for the Doctor between Doomsday eventually meeting up with Martha. Like, at least not enough time that those wounds have scarred over for him.
The Runaway Bride and Smith Jones rarely happening back to back in real time.
Yeah, we don't actually know how much time passed between Runaway Bride and Smith Jones. Some stuff could have gone on between. The way that it feels is like the Doctor just needs to process. Part of me still wants to say, this is Doctor Who, companions leave all the time. The show is kind of milking it. I think audiences are already past Rose before the show. Me doesn't find it nearly as obnoxious or overdone as I used to, or unfair to Martha as a character.
I don't really have that much of a problem with the whole, like, him not getting over Rose. It's more her just, like, doting on the Doctor a little bit too much. It's clear that she has a crush on him. He's not really interested, and he's still thinking about this other girl, and it's like, why does the relationship even have to go here with this?
Having any kind of romantic anything between the Doctor and companion, even if I wasn't against it on principle, we just did it with Rose, so this feels a bit like a retread. I don't think she's doting on him. Like, I really like the dynamic that the two of them have, where she's not remotely afraid to be snippy with him. Whenever he does something that's kind of uncool or just kind of, like, weird, she will just voice that without hesitation. Like, she's attracted to him, but it's not like she worships him or anything. Like, it's not like Amy, where she puts him on kind of a pedestal until she kind of has that broken down for her. Martha immediately recognizes that the Doctor is just a guy, a really smart, really capable, really admirable guy, but she does not have trouble seeing him as a human.
Acts so human for being an alien.
That she just focuses so much on the crush aspect. It's like, oh, he just doesn't see me that way. It's like, that happens. Move on. I mean,
yeah, but again, like, in the context of that scene, it's like, it's not like she's being all forlorn about it. Tallulah's like asking her what the deal is, and she's just trying to give the best answer she can give, you know?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. The show has to kind of go out of its way to make sure this is put in some way, somehow. It's not Martha's fault, I will give her that, but it's like, okay, we have Tallulah pushing it. It's like, oh, you guys are together or something? It's like, why do we have to add this crush? She has a crush on him. He doesn't have the same feelings about her in every single episode. It's like, give it a break. That's my whole hang up on it.
That's fair, I guess. Although, and I don't want to keep like jumping to this episode's defense to where it sounds like I'm just trying to shield it from criticism. I do think there is an element of that's a natural character thing for Tallulah, where it's like we've established that she's like a very romantic, like lovey-dovey character. So like, of course she would latch on to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, like you said. It's not out of character, but it's just more of annoyance to me that we have to see it in so much of it.
With my stance on the whole Martha having a crush on her, but the Doctor doesn't feel the same way, I'm conflicted because on the one hand, it annoys me on paper, but at the same time, whenever I'm watching Series 3, it doesn't bother me that much because I was in Martha's position twice where I had a crush on someone and the other person doesn't feel the same way at all.
I mean, it happens. It's not out of the realm of reality. It's like I said, it's not the biggest deal, but it's still a little annoyance for me. But we pretty much covered everything. Just final thoughts.
I think this is definitely a weaker story from this season, and I don't know, my mind might change on that as we go through, but I have pretty fond memories of most of Series 3, and this is a pair of episodes that I regularly think of as like the bad apples among the bunch. But I don't know, on this viewing, decently fun. Like I mentioned about Ghost Machine, I'm now in a place where I could see myself coming back to these episodes just to watch them. And that's not something I would have said about them before this viewing. They're fine.
I still just don't like them. It's just the premise of it is just not something I'm bored with. It gets way too silly at times. Some of the characters are very annoying, and the science is just horrendous at the end. I could see elements that are good in it, but overall it's still a little horrendous for me to watch. Edward?
For me, these episodes are bad, but I think people overhype them of how bad they are, and I also give it a token that it's not as bad as the episode that immediately precedes this, which not only has a bad story, but has laughably bad effects in it, even for the time. So whereas the episode that come after this is overly ambitiously bad, this one is bad due to bad circumstances.
Well, it's been fun talking with you guys, and I hope everyone enjoys watching this or listening to this.